The wheels hit tarmac at John Glenn International with a jolt that rattled Harper Scott's teeth. 9 years since she'd felt Ohio concrete beneath her feet. 9 years of carefully maintained distance, of Christmas cards with checks instead of visits, of phone calls that started with "I'm so busy" and ended with "I'll try to come home soon." Lies, all of it. She'd never intended to come back. Harper collected her carry-on from the overhead compartment, a single leather weekender that cost more than her first month's rent in New York. Inside, 2 changes of clothes, toiletries, and a manila folder thick with legal documents. The folder had its own pocket, protected by waterproof lining. Everything else was expendable. The terminal smelled like every American airport: recycled air, burnt coffee, and the particular desperation of people in transition. Harper walked past families reuniting, businessmen barking into phones, teenagers sprawled across seats with headphones blocking out the world. She'd been that teenager once, desperate to escape this place. Be careful what you wish for. Her phone buzzed as she waited for her rental car. A voicemail from 3 days ago, the one that had brought her back. "Harper, sweetheart, it's Grandma Helen. Your grandfather passed this morning." Peacefully, in his sleep. A pause, the sound of grief being swallowed. "The memorial is Saturday. I know you're busy, but you need to come home. You need to see this with your own eyes." See what? Harper had wondered, but she'd booked the flight. Now, driving a generic Nissan sedan through Columbus suburbs toward her hometown, Harper watched the landscape shift from highway sprawl to familiar residential streets. Everything looked smaller than she remembered. The high school where she'd graduated valedictorian, just a low-slung brick building now, not the imposing fortress of her teenage years. The Dairy Queen where she'd worked summers, faded paint, half the parking lot empty on a Thursday afternoon. The town hadn't grown. It had shrunk, or maybe she had expanded, and there was no room left for both of them in the same space. Harper's hands tightened on the steering wheel as she turned onto Maple Street. Muscle memory guided her to 1247, third house from the corner. White siding, black shutters, wraparound porch. The house her father had bought with his VA loan in 1995 when Harper was 5 and the world still made sense. She parked across the street, engine idling. The mailbox read Ford in stick-on letters, already peeling at the edges. Her mother's new name, Catherine Ford, married 3 years ago to a man Harper had met exactly once. At a wedding she'd attended out of obligation and left as soon as the cake was cut. Brian Ford, former firefighter, her mother had said on the phone. "A good man. You'll like him when you get to know him." Harper had sent her regrets to every subsequent invitation. The front garden, the careful rows of daylilies and hostas her father had planted by hand, was gone. In its place, gray gravel and 3 concrete lawn ornaments shaped like mushrooms. The basketball hoop her father had installed for her 13th birthday, the one where she'd practiced free throws until her arms ached, had vanished. Even the old oak tree looked wrong, half its branches missing, leaving the trunk lopsided and exposed. Harper pulled out her phone and opened the secure folder her assistant had uploaded yesterday. The property deed from 2009 appeared on screen, words she'd read 100 times. Joint ownership, Catherine Ann Scott and Harper Elizabeth Scott. Her name, still there, still legal. She'd been 19 when she'd co-signed that mortgage, fresh from her first semester of college, helping her newly widowed mother keep the house. They'd sat at the kitchen table, her father's table, and signed the papers together. Catherine had cried. Harper had held her hand and promised, "I won't let you lose this place. Never." A promise she'd kept by leaving and never coming back. Harper grabbed her bag and crossed the street. The porch steps creaked, that hadn't changed, and she could smell cigarette smoke leaking through the door frame. Her father had never allowed smoking in the house, said it disrespected the wood. The door opened before she could knock. Harper. Her mother had gotten old. Not just older. Old. 58 years carved into a face that Harper remembered as smooth and bright. Gray streaked through Catherine's brown hair, pulled back in a careless ponytail. She wore jeans that hung loose on a frame that had always been sturdy but was now just thin. Dark circles under eyes that had once been green like Harper's but were now faded, like color left too long in sunlight. "Mom." They hugged. It felt like embracing a stranger. Catherine's arms came around Harper's shoulders with hesitation, as if unsure of permission. She smelled like lavender laundry detergent and something else, something chemical Harper couldn't place. "You're so thin," Catherine said, pulling back. "Don't they feed you in New York?" "I eat fine, Mom." "Well, come in." Catherine's smile flickered and died. "Brian's in the living room." The house smelled wrong. Cigarettes, yes, but also stale beer and something musty, like laundry left too long in the washer. The hardwood floors her father had refinished by hand were scuffed and dull, covered in places by cheap area rugs. The hallway walls, once lined with family photos, Harper's school pictures, her father's military commendations, now displayed nothing but Brian's hunting trophies, a 12-point buck, a wild turkey, wings spread in frozen flight. "Look who finally decided to grace us with her presence." The voice came from the living room, deep and rough. Harper followed her mother through the doorway and found Brian Ford sitting in her father's recliner. Not sitting. Occupying. Claiming. The chair had been reupholstered in camouflage fabric, the soft brown leather her father had carefully conditioned replaced with synthetic material that probably came from Walmart. Brian sprawled in it like a king on a throne, one hand wrapped around a can of Coors Light, even though it was barely 2 in the afternoon. He didn't stand up. "Brian," Harper said. Not a greeting. An acknowledgement. "That's it? No good to see you? No thanks for taking care of my mother?" He took a long drink, eyes never leaving hers. Typical. Brian Ford was exactly what Harper had expected and somehow worse in person. 52 years old, built like a man who'd been strong once but had let it soften into weight. He wore a stained t-shirt that proclaimed him world's best grandpa despite having no grandchildren. His face was flushed, the permanent ruddiness of someone who drank regularly. But his eyes, pale blue, almost gray, were sharp, calculating. "Harper's tired from her flight," Catherine interjected, voice thin and nervous. "Let me show you to your room, honey." Harper's room turned out to be a storage closet. Literally. A pull-out couch had been wedged between stacks of cardboard boxes labeled Brian's bowling trophies and hunting gear. The air was thick and stale. One small window looked out onto the side yard where her father's tool shed used to stand. Now there was just more gravel. "Where's my bedroom?" Harper asked, though she already knew. "Oh, well..." Catherine wouldn't meet her eyes. "Brian needed an office for his paperwork. And you haven't been home in so long, we didn't think..." "It's fine. It's only a few nights, right? You're just staying through the memorial?" Harper set her bag on the couch. "We'll see." "What does that mean?" "I need to use the bathroom." She walked out before Catherine could respond, before the careful control in her voice could crack. The bathroom had changed too. Brian's razors cluttered the sink, 3 of them, all disposable, all crusted with dried shaving cream. The medicine cabinet overflowed with prescription bottles, Percocet, Vicodin, Xanax, a winning combination for someone who claimed a firefighter's injury. The shower curtain featured Confederate flags. In her childhood bathroom. In the house, her father, who'd served 2 tours in Iraq, who'd believed in the Constitution he'd sworn to defend, had bought with his veteran's loan. Harper locked the door and leaned against it, eyes closed. Breathed in through her nose, out through her mouth. The techniques she'd learned in therapy after she'd left, when the panic attacks started, when she'd realized she couldn't go home. Not because she didn't want to, but because home didn't exist anymore. Her phone buzzed, a text from her assistant. "All documents uploaded, legal precedents attached. Morrison can meet tomorrow morning. You okay?" Harper typed back, "I'm fine. Thank you." Another lie. She pulled up the secure folder on her phone and scrolled through the files. The original mortgage agreement from 2009. The co-signing documents with both signatures, hers neat and careful, her mother's shaky with grief. And most importantly, the conditional transfer clause that required both parties' consent for any major changes to the property's ownership structure. Her name was still there, still legal, still binding. Whatever Brian Ford thought he'd claimed, he was wrong. Downstairs, she could hear his voice getting louder. Walks in here like she owns the place. Hasn't contributed a dime, hasn't even called in months. Harper closed her eyes again, counted to 10. Then she opened the folder labeled Property Records Current and began to read. Dinner was tense and silent. Catherine had made meatloaf, which used to be Harper's favorite, but the meat was dry and the ketchup glaze burned. They ate at the kitchen table, not her father's hand-built dining table, which Harper noted was missing entirely, replaced by a cheap pressed wood set with mismatched chairs. Brian ate like a man refueling, shoveling food without tasting it. He'd switched from beer to bourbon, the bottle sitting openly on the table. Catherine picked at her food, eyes darting between her husband and daughter like a spectator at a tennis match waiting for the serve. "So," Brian said finally, sopping up ketchup with white bread. "How's the big city?" "Fine." "Must be nice. Big apartment, fancy job." He poured more bourbon. "Your mom talks about you all the time. Harper's a lawyer now. Harper works for a big firm. Harper's so successful." His voice turned mocking on the last word. "Brian," Catherine warned quietly. "What? I'm just saying it's nice that someone made something of themselves." He looked directly at Harper, even if they had to leave their family behind to do it. Harper set down her fork carefully. "I left for college. That's what people do. Some people come back. Some people have something to come back to." The words hung in the air. Catherine's fork clattered against her plate. Brian's jaw tightened. "Meaning what?" "Meaning I had a scholarship. Meaning I had opportunities. Meaning staying here." Harper paused, choosing her words. "Wasn't an option for me. But it was an option for your mother. To stay here. Alone. Grieving." Brian leaned forward and Harper caught the bourbon smell rolling off him. "You know how many nights she cried after you left? How many times she waited by the phone hoping you'd call?" "That's enough," Catherine said, louder now, but Brian was rolling. "I was here. I listened. I cared. Where were you? Building your career?" Harper met his eyes. "Yes, building a career. Something you might not understand." "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means I work for my money." Brian's hands clenched into fists. For a moment, Harper thought he might lunge across the table. Instead, he stood abruptly, chair scraping against linoleum. "I'm going out. Don't wait up." He grabbed his keys and his bottle and walked out, the door slamming hard enough to rattle the windows. Silence filled the kitchen like floodwater. "You shouldn't antagonize him," Catherine said finally, voice barely above a whisper. "He antagonized me. He's under a lot of stress. The disability payments don't cover everything, and—" "Mom," Harper turned to face her directly. "Why is his name on the mailbox?" Catherine's hands twisted in her lap. "We're married. It made sense to—" "Where's Dad's dining table? The one he built?" "Brian wanted something more modern. We sold it at a garage sale last year. We needed—" "Money, I know." Harper pulled out her phone, opened the photos she'd taken. "Why are there property tax notices in the bathroom? 6 months overdue?" Catherine went pale. "How did you—" "I looked, like you taught me to do when I was 10. Always know what's happening in your own house. Remember?" "That's different. Brian handles the finances now." "How's that working out?" Catherine stood, began clearing plates with shaking hands. "You don't understand. You weren't here. After your father died, I was alone. This house was too big, too quiet, too full of memories. Brian made me feel—" She trailed off. "Feel what?" "Alive, like I wasn't just waiting around to die too." Harper watched her mother scrape uneaten meatloaf into the trash, saw the tremor in her hands, the defeated slope of her shoulders. This wasn't the woman who'd raised her. That woman had been strong, capable, the kind of mother who fixed her own car and taught Harper to throw a punch before she taught her to throw a baseball. This woman was a shadow. "Mom, I need to ask you something." "Not tonight, Harper. Please. I'm tired. It's important. The house—" "I said not tonight!" Catherine's voice cracked. She set down the plate she was holding and gripped the edge of the sink. "Can we have one night? One night without fighting? Without judgments? Can you give me that?" Harper wanted to say no, wanted to pull out the deed, the documents, the evidence of whatever Brian was doing to drain their mother's life away. But she looked at Catherine's reflection in the dark window over the sink, hunched and small and so tired, and felt something crack in her chest. Okay, one night. One May. Catherine's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank you. The memorial's tomorrow at 2. We should leave by 1:30. Will Brian be there? He said he would. And if he doesn't show? Catherine didn't answer. She just kept washing dishes, her hands moving in mechanical circles, cleaning plates that were already clean. Harper excused herself and climbed the stairs to Brian's office. The door was locked, but the lock was cheap, the kind you could open with a credit card. Harper had learned that trick in college, sneaking into the library after hours. The office was worse than she'd imagined. Her father's built-in bookshelves, hand-crafted mahogany with dovetailed joints, the product of 6 months of careful work, had been ripped out. Raw holes in the walls showed where the supports had been. In their place, particle board units from Walmart, already sagging under the weight of Brian's paperback thriller collection. Her grandfather's desk, the one her father had spent years restoring, was scarred with drink rings and cigarette burns. Papers covered every surface in chaotic piles. Harper pulled on the thin gloves she'd brought and began searching. The filing cabinet was locked, but the key was taped under the center drawer. Amateur hour. Inside, financial documents stuffed without organization, bank statements showing regular withdrawals, credit card bills and collections. And there, at the bottom of the second drawer, property records, 2 deeds, both for 1247 Maple Street. The first dated 2009, joint ownership, Catherine Ann Scott and Harper Elizabeth Scott. The second dated 2023, joint ownership, Catherine Ford and Brian James Ford. Harper photographed both. Then she looked closer at the second one. The signature line where Harper should have released her claim was blank, and Catherine's signature looked wrong, too shaky, the loops too wide, the pressure too heavy. Harper had spent 3 years in document fraud litigation. She knew a forged signature when she saw one. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Stop snooping or you'll regret it." Harper's head snapped up. Through the office window, she could see directly into Mrs. Morgan's house across the street. The elderly neighbor was standing in her window, phone in hand, but she wasn't looking at Harper. She was looking down the street. Following her gaze, Harper saw it. Brian's truck, parked 3 houses down. Engine running, lights off. He'd never left. He'd been watching. Harper took 3 more photos. The forged deed, the collection notices, a pawn shop receipt for military items various, and left the office exactly as she'd found it. Her heart hammered as she walked calmly back to her makeshift bedroom, closed the door, and shoved a chair under the handle. Then she called the number her grandmother had given her. "Morrison and Associates. This is Harper Scott. I need to schedule an emergency consultation for tomorrow morning." "What's the nature of the emergency?" Harper looked at the photos on her phone, at the forged signatures, at her father's legacy being sold piece by piece. "Property fraud, potential elder financial abuse, and I need it handled quickly before someone destroys the evidence. Mr. Morrison can see you at 9 a.m. "I'll be there." Harper hung up and sat on the pull-out couch, listening to the house settle around her. Footsteps on the porch, the door opening. Brian's heavy tread in the hallway below. The murmur of voices, his angry, Catherine's placating. Then silence. Harper didn't sleep. She sat with her laptop open, reviewing Ohio property law, until the sun came up and turned the sky outside her small window from black to gray to pale blue. Tomorrow, she'd see her grandfather buried. Then she'd start digging up everything else. Jonathan Morrison's office smelled like old books and coffee. The 65-year-old lawyer examined Harper's documents with the careful attention of a man who'd spent 40 years reading fine print. His walls displayed military commendations alongside family photos. A Purple Heart under glass matched the one in Harper's pocket. "Your co-signing agreement is ironclad," Morrison said finally. "The transfer to Brian Ford is fraudulent. This signature," he held up the deed, "isn't your mother's hand. I've seen her real signature dozens of times." Harper leaned forward. So we can void it? Yes, but Harper. Morrison removed his glasses. Your mother signed some of these financial documents. If we pursue fraud charges against Brian, the DA might look at her involvement too. She could face charges as an accessory. The words hit Harper like cold water. She didn't know. Can you prove that? Even if she didn't, ignorance isn't always a defense. Morrison's voice was gentle but firm. Catherine will be caught in the middle. She's married to Brian. Spousal privilege means she might refuse to testify, or she might choose to protect him. Have you considered that? Harper had, all night. What are my options? Full criminal prosecution, fraud, forgery, elder abuse. Brian goes to prison, but Catherine might face charges too. Or civil suit only. Void the transfer, get restitution, protective order. Less severe, fewer casualties. Morrison paused. There's also the foreclosure, home equity loan, $45,000. You could pay it off, make the problem disappear, but that doesn't solve the underlying fraud. What would my grandfather do? Morrison smiled sadly. Paul told me before he died. If Harper comes back to fight, make sure she knows what she's fighting for. He meant, don't fight for a house, fight for the people in it. Harper's phone buzzed. A police report, domestic disturbance at 1247 Maple Street, 11:47 p.m. Catherine reported a bruise, claimed she'd bumped a door, Mrs. Morgan had called it in. If there's current abuse, we can file emergency protective order today, Morrison said. I need to talk to my mother first. Abuse victims often protect their abusers. I know, but she's still my mother. Harper stood. File preliminary paperwork for the property dispute. I'll get Mom's cooperation. Harper, your grandfather also said, perfect justice doesn't exist. You aim for best outcome with minimal damage. Harper nodded and left, those words echoing in her mind. Tom Rodriguez waited at Cedar Grove Diner wearing his funeral suit from yesterday. Harper's father's best friend, his battle buddy who'd carried Paul's casket. The man who'd returned the Purple Heart Brian had sold. Helen called, Tom said without preamble. Said you're going after Brian. Harper, I need you to understand something. Brian Ford is one of us. Harper's coffee cup stopped mid-air. Excuse me? Firefighter, 15 years. Saved 7 lives, including a 6-year-old from a house fire. That's how he got injured. Building collapsed on him, crushed his spine. He's got PTSD from watching 2 crew members die in that fire. Tom's voice was firm. What he did is wrong, but prison? That's harsh. The man needs help. He hit my mother. Police came. Tom flinched. That's not acceptable. But Harper, your dad had PTSD too. After his second deployment, he had nightmares, drank too much, got into bar fights. Your mom almost left him. The revelation hit Harper like a punch. What? Paul worked through it. Therapy, counseling. Took 2 years, but he fought to save his marriage. Tom's eyes were sad. Shouldn't Brian get the same chance? You go after him publicly, destroy him completely. What happens? You become the villain. Rich daughter from New York who abandoned her mother comes back and destroys a disabled veteran. That's not fair. Maybe not, but that's how some will see it. The first responder community will close ranks, not because what Brian did was right, but because he's one of their own. Tom stood to leave. Your dad kept a storage unit. Unit 47, you store it on Commerce Road. Combination's your birthday. There's things inside he wanted you to have. He put on his hat. Whatever you decide, make sure you can live with it after. You can't undo this kind of damage once it's done. Harper found her father's storage unit packed with carefully labeled boxes. Harper, elementary school. Harper, art projects. And in the back, Paul Scott, service records. Do not discard. Inside the service box, a journal. Her father's handwriting filled pages with entries from Iraq, from hospitals, from the bad years at home. October 15th, 2010. Counseling session number 6. Dr. Walsh says I need to stop drinking. He's right. Kathy deserves better than this version of me. November 3rd, 2010. Had nightmare again. Woke up screaming. Harper heard, saw the fear in her eyes. What kind of father am I? March 8th, 2011. 90 days sober. Kathy's coming back to bed with me. Small victories. The entries documented his fight, his slow, painful victory over his demons, becoming the father Harper remembered. But the final entry stopped her cold. January 10th, 2016. Updated our wills. Made sure Harper's name is on the house papers. She doesn't know, but if I'm gone, she'll need to protect her mother. Kathy's vulnerable to the wrong kind of attention. This house isn't just wood and nails. It's our family's foundation. Harper needs to guard it no matter what. Her father had known, had planned for this exact scenario. Harper pulled out her phone, called Morrison. File everything. Civil suit, criminal complaint, protective order, all of it. She drove back to Maple Street. Time to give her mother a choice. Catherine was in the kitchen when Harper arrived, scrubbing the same counter obsessively. The bruise on her left forearm was dark purple, roughly the size of a man's grip. Mom, we need to talk. Harper set her phone on the table, pulled up the forged deed. This signature, that's not yours, is it? Catherine's hands stilled. She looked at the screen, and Harper watched realization settle over her face like frost. Oh, God. There's more. The home equity loan. $45,000. He forged that, too. Harper showed her the bank statements. And it's all gone. Golden Nugget Casino, Riverside Racetrack, sports betting. He gambled it away. Catherine walked to the sink and vomited. Harper held her hair back. When the retching stopped, Catherine sank to the floor. I'm so stupid, she choked out. You're not stupid. He manipulated you. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't want to see, because if I saw it, I'd be alone again. Catherine looked up, tears streaming. You don't understand what it's like. You left. You built your perfect life. You don't know what it's like to be 55 and completely empty. So you filled the space with Brian. Yes! He made me feel alive. For the first time since your father died, I felt like a person, not just a widow. Harper pulled out her father's journal, opened to the marked page. Dad knew. That's why he kept my name on the house. Kathy's vulnerable to the wrong kind of attention. He was protecting you. Catherine's face crumpled. Paul did that? 3 weeks before he died. Harper's voice softened. He loved you enough to plan for your safety. But Mom, I need you to testify. Against Brian. About the forgeries, the abuse, all of it. Catherine was silent. Then, I sold some of Paul's things. Before Brian's gambling got bad, his coin collection, military memorabilia, $85,000. Harper felt punched. You sold Dad's collection? Brian needed money. He said it was medical bills, one-time thing. It's always one time with people like Brian. They were just things. Paul was dead, Brian was alive. They weren't just things, Harper's control snapped. They were history. They were the only pieces of Dad I had left. You never called. You never visited, Catherine shouted back. What was I supposed to do? You're my daughter who left. You couldn't wait to escape. Do you know how many times I dialed your number and hung up because I didn't want to be a burden? The accusation hung between them. Because Catherine was right. Harper had left. Had sent checks instead of presents, emails instead of visits. I couldn't stay, Harper said quietly. After Dad died, everywhere I looked, I saw him. I couldn't breathe here. So you left me to suffocate alone. They stood in the kitchen where Harper had learned to bake, where her father had taught her fractions, and the distance between them felt infinite. I'm sorry, Harper said. I'm sorry I left. I'm sorry I didn't make it easier for you to reach out. But I'm here now. Please, testify. Help me save this house. Help me save you. Catherine wiped her eyes. If I testify, everyone will know I sold Paul's things. They'll think I'm awful. They'll think you're human. And Mom, you're alone now. You're just lying to yourself about it. Catherine looked around the kitchen, at the cheap table, the bare walls, the house that had become a prison. Okay, she said. I'll testify. A truck engine rumbled outside. Brian's truck. "He's home early," Catherine whispered. The front door crashed open. "Catherine, where the hell are you?" Brian appeared in the doorway, drunk and swaying. In his hand, the forged deed Harper had photographed. "You went through my shit," he pointed at Harper. "You're trying to take everything I built." "You didn't build anything," Harper said quietly. "You stole it." Brian's face went purple. His hand dropped to his belt where a hunting knife hung in its sheath. Time slowed. Harper saw him draw the blade, saw Catherine scream. Harper grabbed the cast iron skillet from the stove and swung hard. The pan connected with Brian's wrist with a sickening crack. The knife clattered to the floor. Brian howled. "Run!" Harper yelled. They burst through the back door, across the yard, to Harper's rental car. Behind them, Brian stumbled onto the porch, screaming threats. Mrs. Morgan across the street was already on her phone. Harper drove 3 blocks, pulled into a 7-Eleven parking lot. Catherine hyperventilated while Harper held her. Her phone rang. Sarah Martinez. "We have a situation. Brian called 911, claims you assaulted him with a deadly weapon. You need to come in. Make a statement before his version becomes official." "We're on our way." At the station, Sarah led them to a private room. Harper and Catherine gave statements, the forged documents, the threats, the knife, the self-defense. Mrs. Morgan's testimony corroborated everything. "Here's where we are," Sarah said. "Clear self-defense. But Brian's lawyered up with Robert Wade. He'll paint this as family dispute where you overreacted." She hesitated. "There's something else. We ran Brian's background." She pushed a file toward Harper. Bank records showing large deposits in 2019, 2000 to 20. Brian was treasurer of Firehouse Engine 7. These deposits match money missing from their benevolent fund. He embezzled $120,000. From funds for fallen firefighters' families? Harper stared. "Does anyone know?" Fire chief covered it up. They didn't want the scandal. Let Brian resign quietly if he paid it back. Sarah's expression was grim. "He's paid back 0. Been bleeding your mother dry instead." Harper's mind raced. This changed everything. The first responder community would turn on Brian if this came out. "Can we use this?" "Not officially, but if it happened to come out during your lawsuit." Sarah met Harper's eyes. "It would destroy him. Also destroy the fire department's reputation. Donations would dry up. Families depending on those funds would suffer." Harper's phone rang. Unknown number. "Ms. Scott? Marcus Riley. We should talk." Her blood ran cold. Riley, the loan shark. "How did you get this number?" "I know Brian owes me $60,000. I know you're seizing his assets. That's my collateral." Riley's voice was smooth. "I'm a businessman. I prefer to settle civilly. Meet me tomorrow, 11 a.m. Riverside Diner. I have information about what Brian really took, and from whom." The line went dead. Sarah swore. "Don't meet him. Riley's dangerous." "He has information I need." Harper looked at her mother, exhausted and broken. "And right now, I need every advantage I can get." Harper filed the domestic violence report, got Catherine checked into a hotel, and spent the night researching Marcus Riley. Found a wedding announcement. Riley married Maria Torres. Torres, the fire chief's sister. Riley had a vested interest in keeping the embezzlement quiet, which meant he'd be willing to deal. At 11 a.m., Harper walked into Riverside Diner. Marcus Riley looked nothing like expected. Mid-40s, business casual, professional. No visible threat. "Ms. Scott, thank you for coming." He gestured to the booth. "Brian owes me $60,000. You're seizing his assets. That creates a problem. I'll be direct. Pay me $40,000 today, and I'll give you everything you need to destroy Brian. Quietly, without dragging the fire department through the mud." "Your illegal debts aren't enforceable." "True, but I have other collection methods." Riley slid an envelope across the table. "Before you decide, look inside." Harper opened it. Bank statements, wire transfers, communications. The embezzlement laid out in detail, and more. Emails showing Brian trying to sell fire department security information to criminals. "Attempted espionage against emergency services," Riley said. Federal offense, 20 years minimum. But if it comes out, my brother-in-law loses everything for covering up the embezzlement. Families lose their support fund. Your mother's name gets dragged through the mud. He leaned back. Or you pay me $40,000. Use this to destroy Brian quietly in civil court. Limited criminal charges. The embezzlement stays buried. Brian still goes to prison for 7 to 10 years, loses everything. Just without the media circus. Harper stared at the documents. Tom Rodriguez's words echoed, "You can't undo this kind of damage." Morrison's advice, "Perfect justice doesn't exist. You aim for best outcome." "If I do this, I want guarantees," Harper said slowly. "Brian never contacts my family again. And you leave. Pack up your operation and get out of this town." Riley laughed. "That's my livelihood. Fair trade. You're asking me to compromise my principles." Harper met his eyes. 1 year. Wind down your operations, relocate. Or I release everything to the FBI. They stared at each other. Finally, Riley nodded. "Deal." Harper wired $40,000, her savings, earned through years of brutal work weeks. Riley slid the briefcase toward her. "Everything you need, just not publicly." He stood. "One warning, Brian will figure out you're behind this. Cornered animals are unpredictable. Be careful." Harper sat alone with the briefcase. Not perfect justice. Not clean. But survivable. She drove to Morrison's office. Time to end this. The emergency hearing took place on a gray Monday morning. Judge Elizabeth Warren, stern, 60-something with reading glasses on a chain, presided over a courtroom that smelled like old wood and institutional air conditioning. Harper sat beside Morrison, Catherine on her other side. Across the aisle, Brian Ford, his wrist in a cast, flanked by Robert Wade. Brian looked smaller somehow, diminished. The swagger was gone, replaced by something harder to read, fear maybe, or rage held barely in check. "Ms. Scott, Judge Warren began. "You're petitioning for emergency injunction to void property transfer and for protective order. Mr. Ford, you're counterclaiming assault and filing for spousal support. This should be interesting." Wade stood first. "Your Honor, my client is a decorated firefighter who served this community for 15 years. He married Catherine Ford 3 years ago, helped her through grief, maintained the property, made substantial improvements. Now her daughter, who abandoned the family for nearly a decade, returns and manufactures a crisis to steal marital assets." "Objection," Morrison said calmly. "Inflammatory characterization." "Sustained. Stick to facts, Mr. Wade." Wade presented his case. Photos of repairs Brian had made, testimonials from neighbors about his helpfulness, Catherine's wedding vows as proof of willing partnership. He painted Brian as wounded veteran victimized by ungrateful stepdaughter. Then Morrison stood. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. Harper Scott co-signed the original mortgage in 2009. That agreement requires her consent for any ownership changes. She never gave consent. This signature," he displayed the forged deed on a screen, "is demonstrably not Catherine Ford's handwriting. We have forensic analysis. We also have bank records showing Mr. Ford forged Mrs. Ford's signature on a $45,000 home equity loan, which he then gambled away." Wade objected. Morrison calmly provided documentation for each claim. The judge's expression grew increasingly grim as she reviewed bank statements showing casino withdrawals, pawn shop receipts for Paul Scott's military items, the forged loan papers. "Mrs. Ford," Judge Warren said, "you need to testify. Did you consent to these financial transactions?" Catherine stood slowly. Her hands shook, but her voice was steady. "No, Your Honor, I didn't sign the home equity loan documents. Brian told me we needed money for his medical treatments. I gave him my bank account information, but I never signed loan papers." She took a breath. "I did sell some of my late husband's belongings in 2019 and 2020. Brian said he was in debt from medical bills, that it was temporary. I wanted to help him." "And the property transfer?" "I don't remember signing that either. Brian handled all the paperwork. I trusted him." "Did Mr. Ford ever physically harm you?" Catherine's hand went to her bruised arm. "Yes, multiple times over the past year. I didn't report it because I was ashamed." Because I didn't want to be alone again. You understand that's not acceptable reasoning? I do now, Your Honor. Wade tried to rehabilitate. Mrs. Ford, isn't it true you were happy in your marriage? That you're only making these allegations because your daughter is pressuring you? Catherine looked at Harper, then back at Wade. My daughter gave me permission to tell the truth. There's a difference. Her voice grew stronger. I was lonely. Brian made me feel less lonely. But loneliness isn't love and company isn't safety. I chose poorly. I'm trying to choose better now. Judge Warren made notes. Mr. Ford, anything to say? Brian stood, shaking off Wade's restraining hand. This is bullshit. I gave that woman everything. Took care of her, fixed her house, made her feel alive again, and this is how I'm repaid? Her spoiled daughter comes back and poisons her against me? Mr. Ford, I saved lives. 7 people are alive because of me. I got crushed in a burning building saving a kid. And now I'm supposed to be the villain because I tried to keep my head above water? By forging signatures and gambling away your wife's money? Judge Warren's voice was ice. I was going to pay it back. I just needed time. Time you spent at casinos instead of getting help. The judge closed her folder. I've heard enough. Based on the evidence presented, particularly the forensic analysis of signatures and the documented pattern of financial abuse, I'm ruling in favor of Ms. Scott. Brian's face went purple. Property transfer is voided. Ownership reverts to Harper Scott and Catherine Ford as per original 2009 agreement. Mr. Ford has 30 days to vacate the premises. I'm also granting a restraining order. No contact with either Ms. Scott or Mrs. Ford. Minimum 500 yards. Your Honor, Wade tried. I'm not finished. Mr. Ford, I'm recommending the district attorney pursue criminal charges for forgery, fraud, and assault. This court also notes that Mrs. Ford may file for divorce, and any community property claims will be complicated given your documented financial malfeasance. Brian stood frozen, the reality sinking in. Then he turned to Catherine. You did this. You chose her over me. I chose myself, Catherine said quietly, for the first time in 3 years. After everything I did for you, you did things to me, Catherine interrupted. There's a difference. Deputies escorted Brian from the courtroom. As he passed Harper, he leaned close enough to whisper, This isn't over. Yes, it is, Harper said. The house felt different with Brian gone. Lighter somehow, like a pressure had lifted. Harper and Catherine walked through together, cataloging the damage. He ripped out Dad's bookshelves, Harper said, running her hand over the scarred walls. I know. I watched him do it. Told myself it was just renovation. Catherine's voice was thick. I told myself a lot of lies. They stood in what had been Paul Scott's study. The desk, grandfather's restoration, was covered in cigarette burns. The walls where family photos hung were now blank. We can fix this, Harper said. Can we? Catherine wasn't talking about the house. Harper turned to face her mother, really looked at her. The gray in her hair, the lines around her eyes, the fragility that hadn't been there a decade ago, but also something new, a straightness to her spine, a clarity in her gaze. Mom, I need to say something, and I need you to let me finish. Harper took a breath. I was wrong to stay away so long. Wrong to hide behind work and distance. Wrong to make it hard for you to reach out. I told myself I needed space, needed to build my own life. But really, I was running. From grief, from responsibility, from having to watch you hurt. Catherine's eyes filled with tears. But you were wrong too. You chose Brian's comfort over asking me for help. You let him erase Dad's memory because it was easier than fighting. You sold our history and called it survival. Harper's voice cracked. We both failed each other, Mom. Can we stop failing and start fixing? Catherine pulled her daughter into a hug. Not the obligatory embrace from the airport, but something real. They cried together in the destroyed study, mourning what they'd lost and what they'd almost lost. I don't know how to fix us, Catherine whispered. Neither do I. But maybe we figure it out together. They hired James Butler, a contractor who'd worked with Paul Scott years ago. He walked through the house taking notes, occasionally shaking his head. "Brian did a number on this place," James said. "But the bones are good. Your dad built solid. We can restore it." "How long?" 3 weeks, maybe 4. James pointed to the living room. "I can recreate these built-ins from photos. Won't be exactly the same, but close. The hardwood needs refinishing. Looks like years of neglect. Kitchen cabinets can be stripped and restained." "Do it. All of it." Harper looked at her mother. "We're bringing it back." The work began the next day. Harper took extended leave from her New York firm, her first real vacation in 5 years. She worked alongside the contractors, learning to sand floors and paint walls. Catherine helped too, stripping wallpaper and cleaning years of accumulated grime. They didn't talk much at first, just worked in companionable silence, letting the physical labor say what words couldn't. One afternoon, sanding the dining room floor, Catherine said, "I found your baby pictures, the ones Brian had boxed for trash. There's one of you and your dad building that birdhouse for your 3rd grade project. Do you remember?" "He did most of the work. I just held the hammer." "No, you measured everything twice, just like he taught you. Insisted on doing it right." Catherine smiled at the memory. "He was so proud. Told everyone at the VFW his daughter was going to be an engineer. Ended up a lawyer instead." "Close enough." Catherine paused her sanding. "Harper, what your dad wrote in that journal about me being vulnerable. He wasn't wrong. After he died, I was lost, not just lonely, lost. Like I'd forgotten who I was without him." "You were grieving." "I was drowning, and Brian threw me a rope, but it turned out to be an anchor." Catherine looked around the room. "I don't want to drown anymore, even if it means being alone." "You're not alone, Mom. Not anymore." A week into renovation, Tom Rodriguez stopped by with a box. "Found more of your dad's things. Bought them back from various places." He set the box on the porch. His compass, his field jacket, some tools. Harper opened the box, found items she'd thought lost forever. "How much do I owe you?" "Nothing. This is what family does." Tom looked at the house, half restored. "Paul would be glad you're fixing it. Not just the house, everything." "Tom, about Brian. I heard what happened in court. Heard about the embezzlement too." Tom's expression was complicated. "I was wrong about him. Wanted to believe he could get better, that he deserved the same chance Paul got. But Paul wanted to change. Brian just wanted to not face consequences. I'm sorry it ended this way." "Me too. But Harper, you did the right thing. Sometimes the merciful thing is also the hard thing." He tipped his hat and left. 3 weeks later, the transformation was complete. The hardwood floors gleamed. The built-ins stood proud, recreated with loving detail. The kitchen cabinets, stripped and restained, looked better than new. In the study, they'd framed the hole where Brian had ripped out Paul's bookshelves, leaving it visible as a scar, a reminder of what they'd survived. Harper stood in the living room, looking at the restored space. Morrison had called that morning with final news. Brian had taken a plea deal. 7 years for assault, fraud, and forgery. Stripped of his disability pension. Banned from fire services for life. The embezzlement stayed buried, protecting innocent families. Riley had already started relocating his operations to Pennsylvania. Not perfect justice, but survivable justice. Catherine appeared in the doorway, holding 2 coffee mugs. "The house looks beautiful." "It does." Harper accepted a mug. "What will you do now? Stay here?" "I don't know yet. The house feels too big for one person." Catherine sat on the refinished window seat. "Maybe I'll get a roommate, or a dog, or actually call my sister and stop being stubborn." "All good options." "What about you? Back to New York?" Harper had been thinking about that. Her firm had offered her a position. Midwest Territory Manager, work from anywhere. She could stay in Ohio, visit regularly. Or she could return to Manhattan, to her apartment overlooking Central Park, to her old life. "I got a job offer. Based here in Columbus. Same firm, different role." Harper sat beside her mother. "I haven't decided yet." "You should do what makes you happy." "That's the problem. I don't know what that is anymore." Harper looked around the restored room. 9 years I spent building a career, building a life in New York, but the whole time I felt empty, like I'd left part of myself here and never figured out how to be whole without it. Your dad used to say home isn't a place, it's the people you can be yourself with. He was right. Harper put her arm around her mother. I think I'm going to take the job, come back to Ohio, be closer. You don't have to do that for me. I'm doing it for me, for us. Harper smiled. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't adopt 10 dogs. Catherine laughed, really laughed for the first time in Harper could remember. I was thinking maybe 2 dogs, 3 tops. They sat together as afternoon light slanted through the windows, painting the restored hardwood gold. Outside, Mrs. Morgan waved from her garden. Sarah Martinez's patrol car cruised past on routine rounds. Tom Rodriguez walked his grandkids down the sidewalk. Community, continuity, home. Harper's phone buzzed. A text from her New York assistant. Heard you're staying in Ohio. We'll miss you, but I get it. Some fights are worth staying for. Another text, this one from Morrison. Final papers signed, house is secure. Your grandfather would be proud. And one more, from an unknown number. This is Brian. You destroyed my life. Harper showed it to Catherine. Should I be worried? He's in prison. He can't hurt us anymore. Harper blocked the number. Catherine was right. Brian couldn't hurt them. Not physically, not legally, not anymore. He was a closed chapter, a cautionary tale about the cost of not facing your demons. Mom, Harper said, I was thinking. For Christmas, maybe we host dinner here. Invite Aunt Jennifer, Uncle Marcus, the cousins. Fill this house with family again. Catherine's eyes welled up. Your dad always loved Christmas here, made a huge production of decorating. Then let's honor that, bring the traditions back. I'd like that. 6 months later, December snow fell soft on Maple Street. Inside 1247, the house glowed with warm light and laughter. Harper and Catherine had decorated together, real tree by the window, lights strung on the porch, wreaths on every door. The dining table, Paul Scott's original, found in a storage unit and lovingly restored, was set for 12. Aunt Jennifer and Uncle Marcus had arrived with their families. Tom Rodriguez came with his wife and grandchildren. Sarah Martinez stopped by off-duty. Even Fire Chief Torres appeared, hat in hand, to personally thank Harper for handling the Brian situation with discretion. You saved a lot of families from suffering, Torres said quietly. The fund is secure. Donations are up, because of you. Harper nodded, accepting the gratitude but not dwelling on it. This night wasn't about Brian. It was about what survived him. Dinner was chaotic and perfect. Catherine had cooked Paul's favorite recipes from memory. The cousins argued about football. The grandchildren ran circles around the tree. Laughter filled rooms that had been silent too long. After dinner, as Catherine served pie, Harper found herself in the study, her father's study, restored now to its original glory. The bookshelves held his books again, collected piece by piece. His desk, refinished and repaired, sat ready for work that would never come. On the desk, his Purple Heart, his service photos, his journal, and beside them, a new photo in a new frame. Harper and Catherine, arms around each other, smiling in front of the restored house. There you are! Catherine appeared in the doorway. Hiding? Just thinking. Harper picked up the Purple Heart, felt its weight. Dad would be happy, right? That we saved the house? He'd be happier that we saved each other. Catherine joined her at the desk. You know what I realized? This house isn't special because your father built it. It's special because we chose to fight for it. Together. That's what makes it home. From the living room, Tom's voice called, Harper, your mom needs help with the presents. Harper set down the metal carefully. Coming. She followed Catherine back to the chaos and warmth, to family, to home. Outside, snow continued to fall on Maple Street. The house, 1247, white siding, black shutters, wraparound porch, stood solid against the winter night. Lights glowed in every window. Smoke curled from the chimney. Inside, laughter and love. Paul Scott's legacy wasn't the wood and nails he'd shaped with his hands, it was the foundation he'd laid in his daughter's heart. The understanding that some things are worth fighting for, that family is complicated but essential, that home is built not just with hammers and nails, but with forgiveness and choice, and the courage to stay when running would be easier. Harper looked at her mother laughing with her sister, at Tom Rodriguez teaching his grandson to play chess at her father's desk, at the restored built-ins that had been destroyed and remade stronger. Sometimes you have to leave home to understand what home means. Sometimes you have to fight for it to remember why it matters, and sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get the chance to come back and rebuild not just the structure, but everything that lives inside it. Harper Scott had come home. And this time, she was staying.